Don't worry, be happy. You know that song? Don't worry, be happy. There's a phrase in that song that goes, when even life will give you trouble, if you worry, you'll have it double. Don't worry, be happy. That song is so fun. Now, people are arguing with me who wrote that song. Who wrote that song? Bob Marley. Bobby McFerrin made it popular, but Bob Marley wrote that song. And it is a song that just feels like happiness and joy, doesn't it? Don't worry, be happy. We would love to just have that feeling. It's just not that easy, is it? Now, when my son Jason was about 3 years old, he had a lot of health problems and allergies and sinus. And there was one time we had to take him to the hospital. He had like an abscess in his sinus, and they had to go in surgically to take care of it. Now, come on, Mom and Dad. You've been through this. Your firstborn child is in the hospital. He's 3 years old. He's hooked up to an IV. He's getting ready to go into surgery. You're going to have to let him go. We were a little anxious about this. And Jason was anxious. He was like, oh, what's happening next? And he was really, really stressed. So the anesthesiologist came up and said, Dad, you want me to calm him down? I said, yeah, that'd be good. So he takes a syringe, and I go, oh, don't. He goes, don't worry, it's going in the IV. So Jason's all nervous, and he inserts this, and suddenly Jason goes, hi, Dad. Where are we going? Just like that. No worry. Be happy. There's even been a study done recently with Alzheimer's patients. Because what happens in Alzheimer's is you lose your memories, and there are some memories you want to lose. Wouldn't it be nice if you could select out some drug or pill that would take and you could get rid of the bad memories? You know, I go visit my mom now, and she has severe dementia at this point. And she's forgotten every bad thing I ever did. It's a pretty nice little visit these days. She's not asking me, why does your breath smell that way, or anything like that anymore. She thinks I'm handsome and wonderful, just the best little boy in town. But I still wish I had her memories. I don't care if she remembers the things I did wrong, because I don't have the fullness of her. But I am thankful that in this last days, she has some peace. She's not afraid. But you know, I don't think my mom was ever afraid of anything. She's always had this peace that surpasses all understanding. That sense of joy in all things, of what can be, what's still coming, not what has been. It would be nice, following this horror in Connecticut, if we could just take a pill. If we could just forget. If we could just turn the page and move on. Turn the page on this continuing story of mental illness and violence in our country and loss and death. You know, I was really thankful in the midst of this that one of the first things I did here was how many churches filled up, that the doors opened and people came together for strength. Methodist Church, Church of Christ, Catholic Church, and the compassion that poured out and the healing that begins with that, just to come together and to feel strength and caring. And to know that people are coming together and feeling that strength. That's what these quilts do for us. We feel this intangible tie in those ties of prayer. And having received one myself, when you put that quilt on you, you feel this connectedness, this strength, this healing support. And there is a peace I don't understand. This is what happens in Paul's community. They want that peace and quiet. But life isn't that way. There's always interruptions. There's always conflicts in the world. And the community that gathered together in that church in Philippi, that affirmed each other and found this peace and this message of a loving God, of a forgiving God, doesn't find that message out in the world. And there are those that are part of their old tradition. They called them God-fearers. They were Jews that also wanted to be Christian, but they didn't want to give up the past story. They didn't want to turn the page on the law and all the rituals. And there's this conflict and this tension between people and maybe even family members who couldn't be together And there was not the peace between them, and there was a tension around them. And Paul is encouraging them not to give up on this story. And another part in this text, this is a very short letter, but there seems to be two leaders within the church who see two different paths of how we should be. Ooh, that should word. The judgment that comes when you're not going the right way. And Paul encourages patience, gentleness, kindness. Isn't that what we want to wash over this country, over those families, this gentleness and tenderness for all of those who've been wounded by the anger and the violence? That does indeed wound so deeply in the soul that it bends and warps and creates evil. The woundedness and loss that lives out in acts of violence. Now, I was having a hard time with this because I came up with the title, Time to Turn the Page Before This Tragedy. And it seems a little cold and insensitive. You can't just say to someone, turn the page, be hopeful. I mean, it denies the reality of the deep wound and the deep pain and the long-term grief that occurs in loss. And it occurs for all of us, not just that one tragedy. You can't just turn the page when something happens. We come to this time of loss of a brother or pending loss of a mother. The holiday won't be the same. You can't just say, don't worry, be happy. But we can't stay there either. So what do? Don't rush it. Healing takes time. These seasons of tradition that we come into that bring back these memories and feelings of peace and joy and hope. There will be some with us this year. Actually, they're not with us this year. So, some of the traditions that came through. Is that speaking in tongues? I didn't quite. I totally missed it. I remember as a child, one of the things I loved to do at this time of year was to go in the car at night. I had three older brothers and my mom, my dad, in 1957 something. And we would climb in and it'd be cold at night and we'd go look at the Christmas lights. I don't really remember the Christmas lights. Actually, what I remember is getting in the car and coming up against my mother's navy blue pea coat. And it was cold, and she would embrace me, and the energy and the love. And I miss that. But I bring it with me into this season. There are things that we don't have anymore. But we don't forget them. We find a way to take the traditions, the people, the spirit. We find a way to turn the page, but continue the story. You don't find it by focusing on what isn't out there anymore, who's in conflict with us. It's only an internal strength. It's only an infinite spirit of God. This mystery that stirs our hearts and warms us from the inside. You know, I was driving along this week, and of course, there's so many things about the tragedy. But one of the interesting interviews was the doctor who is the chair of the psychiatric section for the San Diego Hospice. And in the San Diego Hospice caring unit, they talked about how people go through these difficult holidays with the loss of someone. And she said, what you have to do is you have to take a tradition and renew it in a new way. She shared how one woman who in her 40s lost her husband and was coming to the first Christmas. And it turns out her husband was an avid surfer here in San Diego. And his great love and joy every morning was to go out and get a couple of waves in and then come in. Even Christmas morning, the one gift she gave him was, go ahead, honey, go surf. And now he was gone. What she did was decide that she needed to do something about that wonderful part of their tradition that he couldn't bring to them anymore, that moment of joy and creation. And so she and some other friends raised money, and they created a bench that was dedicated in his honor, and they had it placed right at the place where they could watch where he used to surf. And anybody who walked by could stop and rest and enjoy the beauty that he had enjoyed so many years. And a new tradition was born. It didn't wash away the pain, but it brought new life to that life that she had had. The only true peace is the peace that comes from within, the peace of faith. It's not a momentary thing. It's not a passing peace. It's an abiding peace. It's an infinite peace. It surpasses all understanding because human understanding is limited. And you can't have ultimate peace without infinite peace. And that's a divine thing, not a human thing. If you put your hope and your peace for joy in something tangible, personal, physical, historical, it'll fail you. It always does, because everything physical fails. It is only spirit that does not fail. The problem with this peace that Paul promises is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make a world of sense, but then it's not of this world. Sometimes our life circumstances seem to be imprisoning us. They seem to be so disappointed that we can't seem to break through. I was sharing this with someone in the church this week, and they told me a story of a family member who, as a young boy, had experienced the wounding of sexual abuse, and how that secret seeped into his soul, and how the shame and the pain and the guilt of it so warped his development that he had to become something he wasn't to protect himself from people finding out what had happened to him. Feeling guilt, feeling anger, not able to process it in an open and healthy way, not able to turn the page on it, became a dark story for him. And as he aged, as he became a young adult, instead of acting out, he began to consume and became an alcoholic and drank and began to deny his feelings until it so distorted him that he too, as a young man, committed a crime similar that placed him in prison for an unknown amount of time. And you might think that that illustration stops there, that we have this tragic ending, close of story. But the fascinating thing is that the prison of guilt and shame he had lived in was more powerful than the prison of rod and mortar and stone that he was placed in. And in that place where he could no longer deny his guilt, he found forgiveness. Forgiveness in his faith that he claimed. Forgiveness for himself. He received this internal knowledge, this peace that surpasses all understanding. And in that peace, he turned a new page. Within that context, his life began. It didn't end, because he began to live. He began to study Scripture. He began to teach classes. He began to pull on the talents God had given him in art and literature and music and offer those and bring healing to this wounded community. And he said, though in prison, I feel more free than ever before. That's crazy. That's Christian. Years ago, my son Chad, when he was 17, gave the sermon for the youth Sunday. I had no idea what he was going to say. And that can make you nervous with Chad. It was good. He was doing well. He was clever. He was articulate. And then he came to the point of sharing his faith. Christian had talked with him a few nights before and helped him to understand it. And he said, I always wanted to have faith. I wanted to have that peace and that assurance. But I felt somehow I was trapped. He described being in a large safe. That's an interesting word. 3 feet thick, with only one window, and he was encased in there. And he could see, as he said, his grandfather outside. He could see Christian. He could see me. And he said, I saw these people flying with their faith, soaring with their faith. And I wanted them to come down and open the door so I could come out, so I could have faith too. But I was trapped inside, and I couldn't get out. I couldn't find the peace until I realized one thing. The handle to the door was on the inside. Wow. He has since cracked the door open. Comes in and out from time to time. But there is a peace in my heart that surpasses all understanding. And there is a hope for his life that surpasses all understanding. And the only way we can come to peace and joy is by opening up and allowing this story of promise. You see, our God is not a God of the past. We have to turn the page. We bring the story with us. But we need a new chapter in this world. We need a chapter of peace, faith, hope, joy. And one day, that will be the end of the story. Amen.
It was not a silent night. There was blood on the ground. You could hear a woman cry in the alleyway that night on the streets of David's town. The stable was not clean, and the cobblestones were cold. Little Mary, full of grace, with the tears upon her face, had no mother's hand to hold. It was a labor of pain. It was a cold sky above. And for the girl on the ground in the dark, every beat of her beautiful heart was a labor of love. Noble Joseph by her side, calloused hands and weary eyes. There were no midwives to be found on the streets of David's town in the middle of the night. So he held her and he prayed, shafts of moonlight on his face. But the baby in her womb, he was the maker of the moon. He was the author of the faith that could make the mountains move. It was a labor of pain. It was a cold sky above. But for the girl on the ground in the dark, every beat of her beautiful heart was a labor of love. Little Mary, full of grace, with the tears upon her face, was a labor of love. was not a silent night on the streets of David's town.